Good morning, Tobago.
Welcome back to Good Morning Tobago on Tobago Updates. And viewers, yes, we are still talking about what was said, what happened in the House yesterday. And joining us online to give us his perspective, because we got his perspective before setting up the House. But we're going to get a little bit more from geopolitical scientist Dr. Shane Mohammed. Good morning and welcome to you. How are you doing?
Good morning, good morning. How are you? Excitement like that.
No, was there enough excitement in the House yesterday in regards to, the information or what was shared from Mr. Morris about the allegations against Mr. James?
Candace, there was again, remember from the start of this conversation, I said from the onset that the word evidence was important.
Yes.
And I kept saying to myself every time I listened to the entire thing from the beginning to the end, I listened to Mr. Morris, and I have to say this, and I will give credit where it's due. There's a particular name of a contractor that exists in Trinidad that should not be in the Tobago space.
Hmm.
And um, that was one of the first contractors that was named. Um, he went on to describe the contractor having uh, allegations of corruption and whatnot raised against the contractor um, in the parliament, and it was under investigation and all of that. And I'll give him credit in that regard that yes, I agree with him that there's certain contractors that does not belong in the Tobago space because of the reputation that they have gathered um, during the period of time in which the partnership was in power. And I would advise, and I would say to the administration that the one good thing that came out of that discussion and that debate was that there are some things that should be left in Trinidad and not be allowed into the Tobago space.
Yes.
That I would give him credit for, right? And it was if it was not said in a private capacity, if it was not said before, if he did not say it, and I don't think he could have been able to say it um, in 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 outside of the chamber because of um, parliamentary privilege. I would say that that particular point he drove home very well, and I accepted it, and I agreed with him because he's right. You have a bad reputation. You have a reputation of allegations, of not even allegations, of evidence of corruption. You are I mean, and he even went on to say that he called the big names in contracting like Junior Sammy and Calco. Yeah, Calco. And he was like, what about these fellas, right? And I have to give credit that, you know, you give credit where it's due. He did raise one very good point about certain contractors or contractor in Trinidad that should not be in the Tobago space, and we
Yes.
take that point, right? The rest of it, however, the rest of it was a circus because it seems as though that was the only point that he had available to drive home because there was nothing that he came to the house with any documents, any correspondence, that even the correspondence that he read, and there was correspondence that he read, emails that he read, nothing connected to the secretary in a manner that you go, wait, boy, Trevor, you in that, all of that going on, you
Yes.
know, it did not startle anybody. I was looking at the comments of people who were commenting while the debate was going on, and the majority of listeners and observers in the Tobago space and the majority of Tobagonians are very satisfied by the work done by Mr. Trevor James,
Mm.
and they give him full support. And I also have to give credit to Mr. James. Mr. James, without a script, without even
Without a
looking
script,
at a
yes.
piece of paper, without a piece of paper, was able to call the project and quote the amount, and
Mhm.
to counter the minority costs and say, well, I don't know where you get 300 million from. You do the maths. I know he started with 54 and he went at 25 and it was four or five that he called, and he said, this is not what my, it doesn't add up to what you are saying.
Yes.
Then he went on to talk about the fact that he knew that when he was signing up for this job, that he had to have a strong shoulders and a broad back. And he knew that given the portfolio that he was about to take on, that he had to make sure and ensure that he was able to withstand scrutiny. And by all means, the man, when he defended himself, there was nothing that he said to me that caused me to doubt him, right?
Mm.
I would say, that the executive as a whole, um, the executive as a whole going forward must take from this debate learning points, and there are
Certainly.
good few learning points.
No, I
Fact
also want to
checks.
get your I also want to get your perspective on the different procurement methods that was aligned by Dr. Faith B. Israel, Assemblyman or Deputy Chief Secretary Dr. Faith B. Israel, because she wanted to quite detail about, there are different types of ways that you can hire a contractor, whether you approach some a special pool of contractor, whether you so select. There are actually, there's about 6 or 7, if I'm not mistaken, 6 or 7 methods. What is your take on just that explanation, that presentation that she gave?
It, Candace, the thing, my motto in life, and I think you might have heard it in our previous discussion, is that I give way to the experts.
Mhm.
The very same way that you would call upon me for my level of expertise in my area, my field, and my specialization. It's the same way that I will not encroach upon a colleague who's an economist or a sociologist. Or so sometimes when we are like prior to the elections and even during the election campaign, when we were on a panel discussion with Dr. Vanis James and others,
Yes.
and the conversation about the economy and that kind of thing would come up, I would pull back and I would be quiet because I would allow Dr. Vanis James and others to go forward and to speak about their area of expertise. And one of the things in procurement is expertise. And again, Mr. Morris also drove home that point when he spoke to the names of the big contractors that are located in Trinidad, right? The thing is this: I there were several contractors that were named that are existing in Tobago, for example, Sierra Brothers, California Stucco. Mr. James went on to talk about giving um, Parks International a contract, even though that they were still under a question mark, right? But what the deputy CS did is that she outlined the fact that you go down the route of procurement based on certain requirements. That's the first thing. You go down you go through the phases of procurement based on areas of expertise and urgency. I mean, if a road collapse now and you need a Bailey Bridge, right? One of that is and there's very few, if I'm not mistaken, one or two in the country contractors who are specialized in Bailey bridges,
Mm.
right? And therefore, and if you have to bring a Bailey bridge from Trinidad to Tobago, you need a you need you need enough notice. You probably will not get notice, but you need to get it on a boat somehow, right? In parts, and then the specialization to build
Yes.
the Bailey bridge over the area that has collapsed. Now that has happened in Trinidad as it pertains to Maracas, and I know a good friend of mine who is specialized in Bailey bridges, and you have to, it's not like you could go out and tender for that. Yeah,
Mm.
it is a matter of picking up the phone and saying, hey, part of Maracas collapsed. There's no roadways for them to pass. We need a Bailey Bridge to be set up. You can do the Bailey Bridge over the next 24 hours.
Mm.
That is a matter of urgency. So, she talked about that. She talked about soul select. She talked about the tendering process. She went all about it, and what I am pleased about, and what I thought was exceptional about her presentation is the woman who she walk. The woman knows she walk. She know the definitions of it. She was able to deliver it without inkling of
Of
even
doubt.
a doubt, putting doubt. It was a teaching moment for Tobagonians. It was a teaching moment probably for Calvin Morris as well, right? Because there are stages, there are different areas, there are different levels of expertise, there are different tier systems, right? That you go to in order to get to get the right person or the right contractor to fit into the job spec that is required, right? And go ahead.
I was also going to ask, were you satisfied with the explanation given by even the chief secretary himself about, what qualified the what qualified the works for carnival for emergency works? Because that was a concern that was thrown about, and it was a valid concern. So are you satisfied now with the explanation that was given by the chief secretary and others for validating the work?
I have to say it was something that I really looked forward to listening to. Why? Because of those doubts that were cast in the beginning prior to the debate. And they, what I love about these fellas is that, and even with Calvin, I mean, I have to give him credit. He's not an arrogant fella. He's not aggressive. He's not he's like, hey, this is what is in front of me, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is what is in front of me. This is the information I am getting. Whether it is that it turned out, right, that, and I'll come back to the chief sec, whether it turned out that um he's just a sitting duck and he's just a puppet on a stick as they said he was, and that he was taking like orders, then what Mr. Morris has to do is some serious introspection and political introspection as to what he wants for his political future. Because he kept referring to the PNM political leader.
Yes.
And the sad fact about it is that you are the one man that was able to take Darrell Spring Garden for what? Four votes were able to take you to carry you over. It means to say that the people of Tobago that voted for you to come in by those four votes was not by a stroke of luck, but also by some level of divine intervention or some belief system that you are the only good man standing, right? And if that is the case, and we measure it by that yardstick that you are the one good man standing in PNM, then brother, don't go into a debate and refer to the past. Don't go to the debate and refer to your political leader. In fact, what he should have done in the previous election was challenge and say, listen, I win the seat. I am sitting down in there doing the dog walk and trying to rebrand the PLM. I should be the political leader, or I should be, yeah, I should be political leader of
Yes.
the Tobago Council. Now, coming back to the chief sec, it was complete mashup. The man was not without fear or favor. He hold back. He said,
Nope.
listen, he said, I'm telling all you on this side and I'm telling all you on that side, right? If any one of you all are corrupt, you all will be fired and you all wouldn't even know. Or you'll get noticed after the fact. He also went on to say that if Calvin has enough evidence and he brings the evidence to prove that somebody, Trevor, whoever, is in corruption, he will walk with him to the police station, right? There was also the statement that, well, if you have so much, so much facts in front of you, why you didn't take it to the police? Why you didn't
Certainly.
take it to the Integrity Commission, right? Why you didn't take certain steps? Why you didn't take up the phone and say, Chief Secretary, I need to see you. This is what I have on paper, right? Even
Definitely.
the email that was read, the question that came to my mind when the email was read, when he was reading out his email, it was, and I assumed because of how he phrased his wording with regard to the email is that the email was not sent to Trevor James. It was copied to Trevor James. And the question is, he didn't say that Trevor James never answered to no email. So, because Candice, you could be emailing the person who is in charge of contracts in my division and copy me thinking that I's a heavyweight. So I go in and tell that young fella or that individual or young lady who is in charge, well, you will go ahead and organize that person. That never happened. There was no word. There was nothing that was said even in the reading of the email that even brought the thought that the man didn't respond to the email.
No.
He did
And
not.
then that,
He
that goes to
didn't.
show, because remember, sometimes, these things, they are copied and pasted to several persons within a division, and it's just more of a way of courtesy and leaving a paper trail. Not and it's not necessarily about addressing a specific person. So I mean, it's just understanding the way how the public service works and so on. But I also want to bring up about conversations in regards to Mr. Watson Duke, because we heard from Mr. Watson Duke in spite of everything that's been going on in the House yesterday. And what are your take on just his presentation, his contribution to debate? Because he seemed to be on the minority side, but however he was not there for his votes.
What a hypocrite! What a hypocrite! The thing about it is all the fancy talk, all the dress up, the fanciness, right? I don't understand if Watson Duke has he no shame. There's still, last night I'm going through social media, and there's still pictures and videos of this man circulating in this lewd way, right? He should, if it's anybody that should have a motion of to throw him out of the assembly, it's that man. Because you come to the parliament, you come to the assembly, right? You make your speech, you give your lecture, you talk about integrity, you talk about doing good, you're talking about everything under the principles of the PDP, what you all promise the people, blah, blah, blah. But
Yes.
what about you? What about you as a leader? What about you as leader of the people of the PDP? What about what we just saw over the carnival weekend? That made you just turned yourself into quote unquote uh, 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 for the lack
A
of a better
laughing
word,
stock.
not a laughing stock, a different level of video star. I mean, you're bordered on pornography. What madness is this? And you are standing in the assembly and you are addressing the assembly and speaking to. And I note that his language was very tailored
Oh yes.
as to how he addressed the quote unquote Falian friends in terms of the gentlemen and the young ladies and whatnot on the other side. But nothing that uh, Watson can see, possibly see at this time or any other time, can give Watson Duke the credibility that he is of good standing. Because between him and the gazelle, like I like to call her, right? Um, they have turned the PDP into nothing but um, they've relegated them to the political cemetery.
Hmm.
And anybody who believes that the PDP can move forward with Watson Duke is delusional and is holding on to false hope, right? I mean, you're preaching one thing in one voice, you're preaching one thing, but your words does not meet with your actions, because the very same rubric and the same yardstick you want to and the same level of integrity you want to hold the members of the council, executive council, by, you can't even hold it to your own self.
Yes. And what about the statement, the statement made by Mr. Augustine, Chief Secretary, in regards to what's going to happen or what's happening with the audit? Because that was another concern that's been bandied about by the minority, that the audit is taking way too long And I mean there are questions. Well, the minority says that there are questions about the audit. However, the chief secretary gave his side, and he says that he may not necessarily come to the public with it, but would it would form the basis for legal action.
But yeah, because at the end of the day, again, he did say that the auditor generals are in Tobago, the auditor
Yes,
general's
they are.
department are in Tobago, and they are in Tobago to do their routine work, which is to audit the assemblies first year, right? But that does not prevent them from auditing the years before. And that is how the Auditor General Department works. They are multifaceted, and they're able to do several different jobs at the same time. Um, what I like and I found interesting is that he would not necessarily take the findings to the public. Why he does not necessarily have to take the findings to the public is because the Auditor General report for all of what is being investigated will be laid. It will have to be laid into the in the House, and it will have to be laid in the Parliament, right? At the end of the day, it becomes a public document, and then it would be the basis for which you decide whether there's criminal findings and whether what is the next step.
Yes.
So he has his responsibilities and his duties lined up for him, and he's very well. Uh, when I listened to them speak yesterday, it was they talk about bastion and talking about flag bearers, and I will say this on the part of Mr. Morris. Um, Mr. Morris handled himself in a way that I would say it was good it was substantial in terms of he brought to the house a very good point, and the point is that at the end of the day they are all bastions of good governance, including himself. Um, if only he could find a mechanism and a way to untie himself from the political uh, I don't know, the political parasites that is the PLM
Yes.
um, of the past, right, so to speak. But um, the debate itself was strong. The debate was very interesting. They came with different views. Zarisha Hackett was on fire yesterday.
Oh yes, she was.
And Mr. James, and what I liked about listening to Mr. James, another politician would have gotten up and ranted and raved in a manner that would have questioned whether or not they were guilty. You understand? The approach would have been a different approach. But when I was waiting for him to stand up to speak, and when he stood up to speak, uh, he was measured and calculated, and
Certainly.
he was able to give the facts, and it spoke about a man of experience, a man that knew where he came from, a man that knew what the role and function of his job was, and what his vision for Tobago remains, and he's resolute in that vision for Tobago,
And
and he
he
even
proved that
spoke about.
he would not be shaken by any of the allegations thrown against him.
No, and he even went on to highlight that the works that has been done thus far, and that is correct. Remember, in the last conversation we had, we talked about whether it was 90 or 19 million, and it was $19 million that was able to do more than a road. It did several things. That 19 million covered at least four different things,
Yes.
and he even spoke about that that bypass road out of Scarborough that
To
uh,
Smithview.
even even we spoke about, and what a convenience it was for the people of Tobago.
Mhm.
So at the end of the day, the debate happened. Um, there's not there's a lot of good that came out of debate from both sides. Both sides were able to highlight where they are at, where what their understanding is. Dr. Faith B. Israel, Zarisha Hackett, the chief secretary, uh, definitely. I have great respect for Councillor Sertica Williams. Or the lady knows her stuff. She's able to stand up and you know be also a mentor, and I would say she's her experience makes her a mentor to the entire assembly, including that of the opposition. Unfortunately, the minority council struggled. The minority councillor struggled, and it happens. It happens in the best of debates. But at the end of the day, Mr. James was able to defend himself, and
Mm-hmm.
he to be honest with you, he could have defended himself without the help of anybody else in it. It could have been just him versus the minority leader, and we call it a day. Because again, the evidence was not there.
All right. Thank you
It comes
so
down to
much,
that.
Dr. Mohammed, for your views on this matter and for your insight.